Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. This is the 105th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Also, I write columns on the Boston Bruins for Boston Sports Journal. So to go to bostonsportsjournal.com and check that out as well. As I said, this is the 105th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. It's going to be a mailbag episode today. We're going to answer some of your questions that you've sent in. All right, let's get into the mailbag. Not a ton at this point to really go over. Development camp finished. Solid development camp for the Boston Bruins this past week at Warrior Ice Arena. Well attended, lots of kids there, which is always great. Lots of families. Lots of Bruins prospects. It was a wide array. Dean Letourneau was there, an 18-year-old kid, fresh out of prep high school in Canada and going to Boston College next year. And I think it was a bit of an eye-opening experience for him, going against older players, going against men in some cases, 23, 24-year-olds, guys that were AHL veterans. But he held his own. He had some skill plays. He showed he can use that 6'7" body for puck protection and puck possession. He showed a really good shot as far as I was concerned. Some people had said, he wasn't a Tage Thompson type because his shot's not that strong. I saw a very strong shot. That might have been the best part of his game that I consistently saw through the entire week was his ability to one-time pucks, his ability to get shots off quickly, and his ability to hit places on the net where he was going to score and do it. With a lot of velocity and a lot of snap coming off his stick. So I liked that part of his game, actually. I thought that was the most developed and the best. But I think I also come away from that camp thinking that it's going to be a slow ramp up for Dean Letourneau at BC. I think going to Boston College and Hockey East is going to be a very big step up for him competition-wise. And I think they're gonna slowly bring him along. I don't think he's going to be playing with Oscar Jellvik and Gasso right off the bat. I don't think they're going to have some kind of Bruins prospect Boston College line going on there. I think he'll probably start lower in the lineup and work his way up. But it's going to be good for him. Like he definitely needs to be dropped into that level of competition, whether it was the USHL as originally planned or now Boston College with Will Smith moving on to San Jose and opening up a spot for him on the Eagles for next year. So I think it's going to be great to be able to watch him. It's good that the Bruins are going to be able to have eyes on him very regularly and, maybe help him along in his pathway along with Boston College. But very encouraged by what you saw out of him, just knowing he was entering a camp where he was going to be challenged quite a bit, and it was going to be some of the best hockey he's ever seen. Best player at development camp for me was Oscar Jellvik. Skilled, extremely fast, created a lot of offense for himself and others when they broke into like 3-on-3 competitions and small area games and things like that, game-like situations. Thought he was very good. A few other players too. I really liked actually Jonathan Morello, another draft pick from this past year, and he was only 17 years old, the youngest guy in that development camp. And I thought he did well and more than held his own and looked pretty good. Dans Lockmellis, I thought looked very good, made some nice plays. Elliott Groenewold, who was another draft pick. Actually, I liked a lot of the Bruins draft picks this year. I thought they got some good players and did well with the picks that they had. Elliott Groenewold going to Quinnipiac, a Vermont kid. I thought he was, he looked like a future NHL defenseman. He was just very smooth handling the puck. Big, definitely played defense and didn't shy away from the physicality. Had a couple of times where he got time and space to shoot pucks and was roofing bullets, top corner and bar down. Like he's got a lot of skill, and he looks like somebody that to keep an eye on. And even better, a Vermont kid, he grew up a huge Boston Bruins fan. So being drafted by that organization, being part of that organization is going to be big for him. And is going to just encourage him more. Anybody else that I really liked or I thought stood out? I think that was about it. There were some other good players that did well also, but those are the ones that come to mind immediately. Obviously, there was a lot of eyes and a lot of people watching Letourneau, and that was the biggest person you were looking for to see how they did. And I thought he fared pretty well. Even the two things I would say about him that he needs to work on are the competitiveness component. I saw him give up on drills a couple times before the coaches blew the whistle, and the other player just kept going. That's something you can't do at any pro level, and that's just being a pro. That's something he's going to have to figure out. So I think that was one where there were times you would have liked to have seen a little more competitiveness out of him consistently. And I think that, was part of the reason at times I think you didn't notice him as much in some of the drills. There were shifts during the 3-on-3 where you really didn't notice him at all, and you wouldn't expect that as much from a first-round pick. But I think that, is part of being young and figuring that out. And I think that's what's going to change over the next couple of years. And also just, part of it's being 6'7", part of it's being young. But I saw him multiple times getting knocked off the puck and just knocked on his butt completely off his skates. Which I think he realized at the end of the week too, that physically it was a much bigger challenge, and he's going to need to meet that challenge. Also I should mention Matt Poitras was there, looked healthy, looked good. Victory for him just coming back from shoulder surgery and being part of that camp and sort of ramping up to NHL camp and whereas much more is expected of him, a few months from now. Did not take part in the scrimmage the last day of camp, purely precautionary. Didn't want him taking body checks or, full-on contact after coming back from shoulder surgery, but no setbacks or anything like that. But he looked good, not great, not dominant. I would have thought somebody with that kind of NHL experience last year, where I think he was the only guy in that camp with NHL experience, would have stood out more, and he didn't. But I also think that's part to do with just rust and not having played much in the last, or really at all in the last 5 months, and just coming back from shoulder surgery. So he gets a little bit of a mulligan there. But it was just good to see him on the ice. All right, let's get to some of the questions. From the Bruins Hagg Bag mailbag, Pucks with Haggs podcast. How did the Bruins lose out on Danton Heinen? Seems like they really wanted to keep him. I know he is from Langley, British Columbia, and supposedly took a discount to play for the Canucks, but I find it baffling that he chose the Canucks over the Bruins. And that's from BKKPKT on Twitter. I don't think it's baffling. I think he went where he got a couple of years and decent money, and certainly going home I think is an attractive option. I think the Bruins liked, obviously, what he gave them. Certainly, they liked it at, a guy that came in on a training camp invite, and they got to sign for 1 year less than $1 million. It was nothing but benefit for him. And he actually got, top 6 minutes the second half of the year. Certainly, he got favorable treatment from Jim Montgomery, his former college hockey coach. And he had a great year, nice bounce back year, and he parlayed it into a multi-year deal with the Vancouver Canucks. The one thing I would say about the Bruins' philosophy and what I can gather from what they've done this offseason and just talking to people is that the Bruins are placing more and more emphasis, a much heavier emphasis, on who has done what in the playoffs and who is going to help them in the playoffs, who's going to be effective in the postseason, what they've learned about the playoffs and the direction that it's going, and what kind of players are going to be effective in the playoffs, say, against an opponent like the Florida Panthers. And I think the determination was that Danton Heinen might not be the kind of player that's going to be a difference maker, or is going to be really effective during playoff hockey. A good regular season player, versatile, can put a few pucks in the net, has become a very well-rounded player, good two-way player, all those things, and helped them in a lot of ways last year. I mean, him playing with Pastrnak and Zacha, that was a good line towards the end of the year. But I think the determining factor for a lot of players that have moved on from the Bruins and the players that have come into the Bruins over this year and over the last few years, frankly, is the Bruins are understanding with much greater detail what wins in the playoffs, what's successful in the playoffs, what you have to be successful in the playoffs and really push into the later rounds. And it's bigger, heavier, stronger, nastier players. It's, you've got to be big, you got to be physical, you got to want it more, you got to want the puck. You've got to want to, be willing to, blow the other guy up and hit him through the glass and take the puck from him. And the things the Florida Panthers were doing on a regular basis to win those games, you got to be willing to do that just as much as they are and just as hard as they are if you're going to hope to win those kind of series against those kind of teams. And that's why, I think you saw players like Danton Heinen moving on. You saw players like Matt Grzelcyk moving on. Jake DeBrusk is a good offensive player, and I think the Bruins would have liked him if it was a much lower number for fewer years. But, another player that is not a super heavy, dirty, mean, and nasty kind of player. Those kind of guys moving on, a bunch of them, ironically enough, all going to the Vancouver Canucks at the same time. Guys like Derek Forbort, Jake DeBrusk, Danton Heinen. And you see them bringing in players like Dan Kostelic, Max Jones. Elias Lindholm is a strong player. I wouldn't say he's super heavy, super physical, but I think he's going to be an effective frontline center in a playoff series. And he showed that, frankly, in the playoff performances he had for the Vancouver Canucks. Nikita Zadorov, super heavy, super physical, super dirty, mean, and nasty player. And the kind of guy that you could do a compilation video of 10 minutes of all of the crushing hits that he's had when he picks his spots to just blow somebody up as a defenseman when they're trying to come into the offensive zone with speed. What you're seeing is the Boston Bruins are loading up on those players. And it happened a couple of years ago at the trade deadline when they got Dmitry Orlov, when they got Garnett Hathaway, when they brought in players that were heavy, physical players, playoff-style players. Now, it didn't work out that year, obviously. But I think they're understanding at Pat Maroon last year at the trade deadline. I think there's an understanding that you need to bring in those kind of players year in, year out in order to be effective in the postseason and in order to really, score goals, get the inside ice, defend, all the things that you want to do in order to have success in the playoffs. You need big, heavy, physical players that are willing to play that style. Matt Grzelcyk, a great puck-moving defenseman, a great story as a Charlestown kid that played at BU, was a hero in the Beanpot, drafted by the Bruins, had a great career for the Bruins, had a nice long run for them. And I'm sure for the family, it's tough to move on at this point just because they're so intertwined with the Bruins organization. But, that you can't win in the playoffs with 5'8", 175-pound, 180-pound defensemen. You just can't do it. You saw the last play that Matt Grzelcyk will ever be on the ice for the Boston Bruins was John Tavares picking his head up with the puck, seeing that Grzelcyk was the only thing between him and the net, and Tavares just putting his head down and bullying his way to the net, and just knowing that he was going to be able to get there against Grzelcyk, trying to stop him one-on-one. And, Tavares didn't score the goal, but it created the chaos in front that ended up leading to an overtime winning goal. And, that's what happens when you have smaller defensemen in the playoffs. When you look at the Boston Bruins now across the back end, it's 6'1", 6'2", all over 200 pounds. The biggest one's obviously Zadorov, who says, "Don't call me Big Z," because I don't want to be compared to Chara, and I shouldn't be compared to Chara. Credit to him for saying that, by the way. 6'6", 250 pounds, maybe even more than 250 pounds. But just massive and extremely physical, going to make you pay a price to get to the front of the net, going to pound you physically, going to wear you down over the course of a series. The Bruins needed that kind of intimidating force on the back end. And, they had it to a degree in Charlie McAvoy, but I think it wore him down trying to be that guy and play that way all the time. And to bring in a bruiser like Zadorov that can play that way all the time and potentially play with McAvoy, I think is a big deal. And I think is a great sign. And I think it's something where I think the Bruins fully understand now what they need to do with the players they have to get the best out of them and to have success in the playoffs. And I think that's what, this is all about. I think And getting back to the Heinen question, I think that's what the decision was. The decision was good regular season player, not going to be a great playoff player. We need to get better playoff players. We need to get guys that are going to be more effective in the postseason and not be a team that has these great regular seasons and then doesn't look like the same team in the playoffs when you start throwing them against the best teams in the league, when it's just a war for 7 games and the team that has more will, more toughness, more physicality wins out at the end of the 7-game series. And I think they understand now that, they need some more of that element in order to be successful. And they need to base a lot of their decisions personnel wise on what's going to help us in the playoffs versus what's going to help us in the regular season. Because I just think based on, Jeremy Swayman in net, Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm on defense, Inzadorov now and Carlo, having Pastrnak, Marchand, Zacha, now Elias Lindholm, Charlie Coyle, like they've got enough talent there, and they've got the goaltending and the defense where they're going to be a regular season playoff team. They're going to be a team that's going to get enough points to qualify for the regular season. They need to start fortifying and making damn well sure they have enough weapons to go in the playoffs, and they're playing the style of play that's going to be successful in the playoffs. And I think they've got it now. I think they've figured it out to a degree. And these personnel moves are based on that. And they went from, I think, a few years, they tried to pick up these players at the trade deadline and think that was the way to do it, is give the team a shot in the arm physically towards the end of the year to help them get over the hump in the playoffs. Now I think they're just going to bring in these players from the very beginning of the year and let them help the team get through the entire regular season and not allow them to be pushed around and really physically play at a different level throughout the regular season. And I personally like that strategy. I personally think that that's the right way to do it. I'm really looking forward to seeing Max Jones and Marcus Stellick on the fourth line as very physical, heavy players, along with Johnny Beecher. I think that'll be a really effective and fun fourth line to watch. And, I'm intrigued to watch this Bruins team. A lot of it is going to come down to Jeremy Swayman being able to maintain his performance for 60 plus games during the season, and be the guy that he was last year for longer extended periods of time. But frankly, I think he can do it at this point. Let's also thank Game Time, your best place to get Red Sox tickets at Fenway this summer. And actually they're winning some games, so you probably do want to get Red Sox tickets at Fenway summer. Although for me, I might use Game Time. I saw yesterday that Journey and Def Leppard and Heart are going to be playing at Fenway Park in August. So I may use Game Time to go see that threesome, because I went and I saw Poison, Motley Crue, Def Leppard, and Joan Jett last year at Fenway, or it was 2 years ago. Wow. I can't remember. That was like one of the all-time great concerts. Def Leppard was unbelievable. I would definitely go. I mowed a lot of lawns in middle school with the Walkman playing Def Leppard in my ears, Evan, back in the day. Young Joe Hagerty was like 12, 11 years old. Game Time is a great place to get tickets for concerts, baseball, all that stuff right now. Seat views, you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Zone deals, you save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. This is just good stuff. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, create an account, download the app, and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, next one. Hey, Haggs, love the direction the Bees are going, especially if we ink Sway to a big long-term deal. We need to build the back end in front of him. If Lindholm doesn't have chemistry with Pasta, do you feel like we have enough scoring depth 5-on-5 to compete in the playoffs? From Martin K. 3737. I do think they've got enough scoring depth to compete in the playoffs. There's a very strong school of thought that Elias Lindholm, the best season that he had in Calgary, the best NHL season that he had over 40 goals and 80 points, was with Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk as his wingers. And putting him with Pavel Zacha and David Pastrnak, while not, the same firepower level as Gaudreau and Tkachuk, puts him in the category of a player that is, well, it puts him in the category of a center playing with one elite winger and one pretty solid winger, where that's going to up his offensive game. Certainly, I don't think he's going to have a down year like he had last year in Calgary and Vancouver, where even he admitted, I think the trade rumors and the trade speculation was bothering him and he was having a hard time with. So, and it affected his production. I think. And certainly the quality of players he was playing with, too, and the quality of teams he was on affected it as well, especially with Calgary. Calgary. I think that was just not great teams. And he was, his production went down as soon as they sort of stripped down their roster through no fault of their own and tried to start over. So I think putting him in a position like he's going to be with the Bruins, having Coyle and Marchand together, and obviously a big factor is going to be who they put at right wing with Brad Marchand and Charlie Coyle. If it's Fabian Lysell, if it's Trent Frederick, if it's Morgan Geekie, if there's somebody they trade for at the trade deadline to come in and be, a hired gun on the wing to score goals, I think that's going to be the place where they're going to look to upgrade at the trade deadline. That'll be the one area they're probably going to need a player is on the wing to put the puck in the net. And I'm sure there will be plenty of those at the trade deadline. And somebody you could very readily plug in with Charlie Coyle and Brad Marchand. But I think they're going to have enough scoring. I think having high level of scoring, having an offense that can get you to the Stanley Cup Final and win a Stanley Cup, I think it's going to be predicated on what they can do at the wing with Marchand and Coyle. Because I think Zacha, Lindholm, and Pastrnak are going to be good. I do. I think that's a line that's going to be effective. That's a line that's going to play good two-way hockey. I just think if you want to be elite, you're going to have two lines that are really going all the time, and they're going to need help on the right wing with Coyle and Marchand. And if you have a third line that's at the end of the day is like Morgan Geekie, Trent Frederick, and a third player, if it's Brazeau or, somebody else, Lysell, Poitras, if he's there, whoever emerges on that third line. If you can have a third line that's got young talent, maybe if Brazeau and Poitras are there and somebody else, Trent Frederick or whoever, or Geekie, I think that would be interesting. And I think that's when you start talking about, okay, they've got something here, especially if Jones and Kostelic really work on the fourth line and kick in some offense. You could see the potential for this being a much better offensive team than they were last year. And certainly in the playoffs they could be, because a lot of the name of the game in the playoffs is just wearing the other team down physically, wearing down their defense. And that's how you get a lot of your offense, is by just like pounding them into submission. And I think they're going to have a lot of players that are going to be able to do that. And it's exactly what Florida has done to be successful the last couple of years. So I think just based on personnel, based on the way that they're going to play, based on the coach that they have that's thinking offense all the time and continues to preach that, and based on, Zadorov being there is going to free up guys like Lindholm and McAvoy, I think, to think more offensively and to create more offensively. I think that's going to be a big part of it too. And Mason Lowry, let's not even forget, like a year of him fulfilling his offensive potential with the Bruins in a low pressure bottom pairing role to start. Like, gonna love to see that. I think that's going to be really good as well. So yes, long story short, I do think they have scoring depth 5-on-5 to compete in the playoffs, and I'm really interested to see what they're going to be able to do. This might be hard to get answered, but does Mark McLaughlin have any chance of making it with the Bruins or being an everyday NHL player? As a Billerica resident, I've watched him and followed his career, and I'm hoping he makes it to the NHL. Thank you. That's from MSpec1. I don't think he's going to be an everyday NHL player with the Bruins. Based on the way that they bring in fourth line players, based on the way guys like Johnny Beecher have kind of hopped over him developmentally and getting those shots at the NHL level, I would assume that he's not going to consistently get that shot. I think he's the kind of player move up if there's injuries, if there's opportunity because of injuries, because of a numbers sort of game, that he's going to be able to come up. Like, obviously has played really well when he's gone up to the Bruins, and a couple of years ago had a great camp, and thought it was a shame that he didn't start the year in the fourth line. But I think there's a limit to what he can do offensively. There's limits to his offensive skill set. And his value is based around hustle, winning faceoffs, killing penalties, just playing rugged, hard-nosed fourth line kind of minutes and being sound two ways. And, there's room around the NHL for players like that, but I think, he probably needs to move to an NHL team with less organizational depth if he's going to be a regular at the NHL level. And that, frankly, means it's probably going to not be as good an NHL team. And I think that's part of the problem here is Mark McLaughlin's playing in a Bruins organization that makes the playoffs every year, that is very competitive, that the 12 forward spots are all their legit players that end up making it with the Bruins, and they're really good at identifying NHL or AHL guys in other organizations that have NHL talent, the Justin Brazeaus of the world, and those kind of players kind of hop over you too, depth wise, when they come into the organization. But trading for Mark Kastelic, that's kind of the kind of player that Mark McLaughlin would be at the NHL level. Or viewed that way anyway. And when you trade for a guy like Kastelic, that basically puts a roadblock right in front of a player like McLaughlin, who I think does the right things, works hard, says the right things, goes about his business the right way. Is a really stand-up guy. Credit to him and his hockey upbringing in Billerica, and also learning his craft at BC. And they always seem to crank out players like that are good, solid pros, good people, good organizational team members, like all that stuff. So, he's a plus for the organization. I just don't see him getting a long run here. I think the best run he had will have ended up having with the Bruins is probably the first run he had, the first couple of years. And then they started to bring in more sort of depth players around him and more waves of young players. I think people just passed him on the organizational depth chart. So like a fresh start would probably be the best thing for him at some point in the next couple of years, and he'll get there. You just hope that the next place he goes, he's able to push through and carve out a role for himself at the NHL level, because I'm not sure it's going to happen for him in Boston, unfortunately. From 4 hey Joe, how has Poitras been on faceoffs this past week at development camp? Thanks. Well, he was fine. But two things, not a ton of faceoffs taken at development camp. It's much more skill-based edge work, skating work, fundamental stuff for a lot of the practices. And then the last couple, they do more sort of battle drills and game situations. But really, even the 3-on-3 tournament at the end, not faceoffs, no faceoffs taken except for the very beginning. And the scrimmage, like a handful of faceoffs. And like, not only were there not a lot of faceoffs taken, but I would also say that you're not going to be able to gauge a guy like Matt Poitras and his faceoff ability and him taking faceoffs until he's doing it against NHL guys. The reason guys like Poitras struggle when they're 19 years old in the NHL on faceoffs is because they're going against veterans that have been taking faceoffs for 10 years. And pros that know all the tricks, and you have to sort of learn who they are, learn what they do, have scouting reports on those guys, have a book on all those guys you go up against in the faceoff circle, and have your own go-to moves that are going to win all the time, and sort of develop your craft that way. So it's an uphill battle for young kids like Poitras. I mean, everybody, like even Sidney Crosby, I think struggled with faceoffs when he first came into the league. It's a learning curve for all those guys. So you're not going to be able to tell much about Poitras and whether he's improved in the faceoff circle if he's going against, Dean Letourneau, who is coming from Canadian high school hockey basically, and is going to go to BC next year. Like him winning faceoffs against somebody like that is not going to help him at the NHL level. So not a way to tell anything about Poitras in the faceoffs. He did acknowledge a couple of things during the week. One was that he needs to get physically stronger. He said he added 8 to 9 pounds to his frame since the shoulder surgery back in February, which is great news because he definitely needs to get bigger and stronger. I think he also needs to get faster, and he needs to work on his skating. And I think that's the biggest. And I talked about this earlier in the week with Mick. I think that's the biggest element that Poitras needs to work on, is because he's never going to be the biggest guy in the world. But his mind is great. His hands are great. He just needs to work on the skating and the edge work to make sure he's getting there faster. He's getting in and out of danger faster. He's separating from defenders faster, getting up the ice faster as a center. Like, he's going to need all that stuff if he's going to be effective at the NHL level. If he doesn't improve his skating speed and his ability to quickly separate from opponents and get the ice up, get the puck up the ice fast, even if he's got like the counter moves and the east-west game and a lot of the stuff that he likes to do, you do need a certain level of speed in order to get there and be able to do that. And I just don't think he's there right now. Like, he's got a lot of Krejci in his game, and Krejci was never the fastest guy in the world, but I think Krejci increased his level of skating speed and his edge work as he went along in the NHL enough to survive and move the puck up the ice as a center and get it consistently enter the offensive zone, even though he did play east-west as well. And you see Poitras going to need a little more of that, just like a little bit more separation speed and a little bit more skating speed and edge work in order to get himself time and space, in addition to the creativity he has and the way he thinks with the puck and, the way he's able to find open space. He does a good job of that when he has the puck. But skating speed's going to only help him in those areas. So I think that is a big part of it, and working on the faceoffs and, getting physically stronger. All those things are going to help him. Didn't see a ton of that at development camp. Thought he was good, not great, not dominant. But he's got the whole summer and he's healthy to be able to work on those things and really hone them in for, frankly, what's a big training camp for him and a big season next year for him, where, the Bruins are hoping that he's going to be a third line center maybe, and if he's going to do that, he's going to really have to be like he was last year, where he hit training camp with a lot of momentum and ended up winning a roster spot and surprised everybody at 19 years old. He's going to have another camp like that to hold off the challengers and, start the year in a very key spot as a third line center on a team with Stanley Cup aspirations and continue moving forward. But he's 20 years old. So he'll get more chances if he's not up for the challenge this fall. And if other guys sort of hop over him in the battle for those positions, but he's also he's getting to an age now where he's learned it at the NHL level, and he's seen what it's all about, and he should be able to use that information and help himself win a spot and keep it. So it's on him, and it's going to be fun to watch because the talent is there. There's no question about it. And they could use an offensive playmaking center like Matt Poitras, who could eventually even push up further in the lineup. So it'll be fun to watch, and you hope he brings the same kind of magic and enthusiasm he had a year ago when they hit training camp in the fall. Joe, Dean Letourneau is great. Outside the box thinking. I was hoping Cam and Don would do this. The kid is 6'5" wing, mega range. Now if Cam can turn him into a beast, that would be awesome. Kid has range, 10 feet left, 10 feet right. Thomas Blackington. I love the pick because they were taking a swing for the fences. They were overlooking the competition level. Saw the dominant 6'7" center with great offensive skills, headed to BC, produced at the level he was at, and really put himself on the map with the way he played up in Canada, and has the frame to put on a lot more weight, is going to be a much bigger pro. We're talking about a player that is going to be huge at 6'7" when he gets to the NHL level. And he was saying to reporters up in Vegas after he was drafted that he thinks he's going to be at BC for a year or two. I don't think that's the case. I think he's probably going to be at BC for 3 years, maybe, because I think he's got that much development to do before he's ready for the pros. I think you could see that just physically and competitively. I think you could see that at development camp, that he's got some work to do, and has to consistently play against better competition, against tougher, harder, faster, stronger players. in order to steal himself and in order to really, become that himself. But the talent was there. He made a bunch of great offensive plays. He certainly was noticeable at times. When he looked determined, like he was going to use his size and he was going to make something happen and he was going to win battles and he was going to be involved. When you saw him on a shift when they were playing 3-on-3, where you could see in his mind he was determined, all right, I'm going to make something happen here. He usually did. There were just other times where you could see that he was not in the I'm going to make something happen here sort of mentality. And, maybe never touched the puck, maybe touched it for a second and that was it. There was one play where he and Don Lockmellis both went to the sideboards to battle for a puck. And Lockmellis just easily won the battle, won the puck away from him with momentum going the other way and turned it into a goal where he roofed it backhand. I actually put the video on my Twitter account during the 3-on-3. But that's a situation where you're 6'7" along the boards. You can't be beaten by Don Lockmellis that cleanly, where he can just pick the puck, go the other way with speed, and beat everybody down the ice and flip one past the goalie. You got to put on more of a battle there. There was another play, too, where Elliott Groenewold scored, spun off his defender behind his own net. As soon as the defender got there, he spun off him and took off up the ice. And you could see it because it was 3-on-3, it was man on man. And all of a sudden it was Letourneau's job to leave his guy and to kind of step up and stop Groenewold as he was skating towards mid-ice and towards the offensive zone. And it was a really just perfunctory, not even challenging him at all when he was skating up on him. And Groenewold just skated, sidestepped him and had enough time, space, confidence, knew he wasn't going to get hit or challenged and absolutely blasted a rocket top corner past the goalie, because he knew he wasn't going to get stopped. Those are the kind of things that can't happen if you're 6'7" and you're strong and you're big. In addition to being skilled offensively, you just want to see a little more compete in situations like that. And like I said, there was another play where there was a one-on-one drill and the puck went away from the net and he just basically stopped skating, and it was against Frederic Brunet. And Brunet just went to the corner, kept going, and then, flipped the puck out of the zone because it was a one-on-one and he was the defender and Letourneau was the offensive player. And it just looked like Letourneau just gave up on it. And the other player wasn't going to give up on the play until the refs blew the whistle and the puck was out of the zone. And, for Letourneau, you want him not giving up on a play until the ref blows the whistle or the puck is in the net. And he just doesn't rest until the puck is in there. And, you live and you learn. He's an 18-year-old kid. They're going to make mistakes like that. But it's just when you've been watching enough and you see things like that, you're all right, he needs to have a little more doggedness to his approach, especially in a NHL, development camp setting where you're trying to impress people and show them what you're all about. But talent is there. You can't manufacture that. He's 6'7", very skilled, and that's why he was taken in the first round. Somebody told me he's probably more like a Jumbo Joe kind of player than Tage Thompson kind of player, which is perfectly fine. I'd take Jumbo Joe all day long, or even a poor man's Jumbo Joe. You just hope it's not a Joe Colborne type player instead, who was kind of passive like that too, and he was a big body, and that's why he never really consistently made it, is because that fire just wasn't burning in there. And you hope that isn't the case with a kid like Dean Letourneau, and frankly, he's got plenty of time to prove that it isn't, that he has that fire inside, and start doing it next year at BC. So that's why you can't judge too much by what you see at development camp. You can make observations about, okay, I saw this, I saw that, I like this, I like that. I liked Letourneau's shot. I liked his big frame. I liked his ability to possess the puck and use his body well against defenders. He knows how to do that already. Some of his stick skills were pretty good. But I would say the skating is okay. Can definitely be better. The physicality definitely needs to get stronger and bigger. And I just think he needs to have more of a killer instinct when he's involved in game situations and in drills and things like that. Can't just sort of float offensively and wait for his opportunities. Has to be really dig in offensively and defensively. if he hopes to have consistent success. But either way, I like the pick. I like that they went for the big offensive upside there. Some people were mentioning this kid Liam Greentree, I think his name was, that got taken right after the Bruins pick as somebody that might have been an option, might have been a good player, and looks like a pretty good player. But I like taking the 6'7" center that's going to BC. That's going to be kind of a long range project, maybe like 3 years, 4 years down the road. Will pay dividends for the Bruins because I don't think they're in a hurry. I think they want to find the next great center, and you need to swing for the fences. You need to go for the big potential there if you're looking for the guy that's going to be your franchise center for the long term. And I think they lessened a little bit of that urgency by signing Elias Lindholm. So now they can afford to be patient with Dean Letourneau and watch him develop at Boston College. So I like the pick too. I agree. All right. That is it for questions for this week. Thanks for joining us.